Okay. There it comes. All right, Mark. Hey, Mark, can you hear us? The mute button's in the bottom left if you're.
How you guys doing?
Oh, here we go, Steelers.
You didn't know I was a Pittsburgher, Mark, did you?
Yeah, I couldn't tell by your accent at all.
Hey, so here's my beef, and I think you already know my beef.
Before we go to your, I got to make a correction on broadcast.com because you couldn't be any more wrong.
Well, that wasn't me speaking. I wasn't saying that.
Okay. But so let me just give you first, it wasn't my first company. I was already retired by the time I started AudioNet, which turned into broadcast.com. And I was already worth a lot of money. I am fired from a software job, started a company which became one of the largest local and wide area networking systems integrators in the sold it, did okay, started a hedge fund, crushed it, sold it quickly. So by the time 94 rolled around, I was already well off. And if I sound breathless sometimes, it's because I'm on my treadmill. And so anyway, French, there's got to be a way we can do sports on this thing called the internet. I'm like, okay, I'm a networking guy. I can program. Let me see what I can do. That was the start of the streaming industry. And so the time, early 95, when nobody even knew what it was called, and it was called netcasting and internet broadcasting, we started out of the second bedroom of my house, and nobody, maybe they were experimenting at different places on M-Bone and other places, but there was nobody doing any commercial streaming at all. And that's what we did. We built the biggest destination for streaming, and we sold it to Yahoo. And when we sold to Yahoo, not only had we been the first, but we were the largest by, I can't even begin to tell you how many multiples over everybody else. We dominated. When we went public, we had the largest IPO in the history of the stock market, the first day jump. And so then Yahoo buys us, and the internet business, the internet stock market craters, and they freak out and they shut down pretty much everything. All right, shit happens. So, but when you say what I built, what we built, 330 people built, wasn't aligned with anything, nah. You don't know what you're talking about, not to be disrespectful, but you don't. We started the streaming industry. Yahoo didn't use it. If Yahoo had done what we had discussed and why we merged with them, there would be no YouTube. There would be, no Pandora. We had hundreds of streaming radio stations, original. We had live and on-demand audio and video shows that we were doing. I mean, they're better quality now, obviously, but there's little of anything that's done today that wasn't done in the mid-90s, early 2000s. It's just more bandwidth, you can do it better. So anyways, put that behind us. Now we can talk Bitcoin.
Yeah, Mark, I have a podcast that I did that covers that entire story that you just described from 2015 on our website. I'll tweet it out to people if they want to hear the story.
Right here, correct.
So here, Mark, my question for you, and this is where I get very frustrated, is do you understand the immediate clearance on Bitcoin? Because I'm assuming you do. But
which say it again. What about Bitcoin?
So the thing that I guess upsets me whenever I see you posting about Dogecoin and things like that is I assume that you understand that Bitcoin has this layer 2 lightning network
of course,
that immediately settles.
But it's very nascent, and you can see that, right? And I understand what Stacks is trying to do, and I follow Stacks, and I've looked at applications on it, but it's very, very nascent, and people have been talking about Lightning since 2018, right? So this is nothing new. And just like a lot of Ethereum compatible, or let's just say smart contract compatible blockchains, there's a lot of talk, but there's just no real applications that are being used. And a part of that, because you guys have done such a good job selling Bitcoin as a store of value.
Yeah, but the when I'm looking at what Bitcoin's going to solve, like I'm not concerned about getting transactions for buying equity at zero fees, right? Like that's not a problem I need solved by some decentralized smart contract layer. I don't need that solved. You already have that today. It's zero fees, right? Why do I need? Am I concerned that these exchanges are going to take my equities? No, I'm not concerned about that. The issue at hand is the fact that you have the debt market being manipulated for 40 plus years, so much so that they've bid the prices of the bonds to the moon and yields are compressed down to 0%. And we're starting to see social unrest all over the planet because it's been manipulated so bad. So like what's being solved, I think, is the first thing we've got to ask ourselves.
Okay,
And then we have to ask ourselves, well, what is the thing that's going to supply that solution in a decentralized way that nobody can screw with?
Okay, first, like I just tweeted about the myth, the person, the legend. A lot of that is just what you just said, right? So yeah, no one's disagreeing that there's a whole lot of money driving down interest rates, driving up the price of bonds, treasuries, everything. But that's happened before, many times.
Not
Right?
really. Not really. If you go back to the 1980s, the 10-year treasury was at 16%. So it was super low. What are you talking about?
Yeah, and then in 2010, 2011, they tried everything but a helicopter drop to push down rates to stimulate the economy.
Yeah, and they've never stopped.
Well, no, they reduced it some, and then we almost got to a break-even budget.
How can you say they've reduced it when the 10-year treasury is at 1.5% right now, Mark?
Now, you said that it hasn't happened before, and I'm telling you it has. And so, while yes, we can argue about quantitative easing, and yes, that's a giveaway for rich people and accelerates the pricing of assets, including Bitcoin, then the next question becomes, Bitcoin has no. So let's just look at another myth: gold. The exact same thing you just said is exactly what gold fanatics say. Prior to Bretton Woods, prior to 1973, we didn't have A, B, or C. And when we got off the gold standard, everything went to hell. And when everything goes to hell, you want gold. It's bullshit, but that's what everybody says. And that's the selling pitch for gold, right?
Well, I don't own gold, and I
But
think gold has issues because it always requires a trusted agent. That's why I don't think that it's a good store of value.
gold bars in your house?
No, of course not.
Of course you can.
No, I thought you said, do I have gold bars
No.
in my house? And I said, no, of course I don't.
All right. So, but the question is, can you? And the question I asked is, don't gold?
But that's at it. But Mark, so listen. So what you're talking about is at an individual level. What I'm talking about is at a sovereign level.
No.
Gold has always failed and always will fail because it requires a trusted agent.
No, you're wrong, right? Because first of all, it doesn't require a trusted agent. People can own physical gold at the consumer level.
At a sovereign level, it always requires a trusted agent in order to stand up a currency on top of it.
No, the United States of America and other countries own gold.
Yep.
They own bars and bars of gold, and it's not used as anything. It's there
because it requires a trusted agent, and because they manipulated the money multiplier from 1940 to 1981, they had to come off the gold standard, and we've been in a fiat society ever since.
That's no reason. Again, that is absolutely no explanation for why any country needs to own gold. None. There's nothing. There's no correlation. There's no connection. There's no causation between what has happened since 1973 and why nations own gold. None.
Mark, if you're trying to make the argument that gold's worthless, I agree with you.
No, I'm just saying, whether it's Bitcoin or gold, it works the same way.
No, it doesn't, because Bitcoin does not require trust like gold requires trust to stand up a currency on top of it. That's just the fact.
You're making that up. Gold does not require. gold requires currency. It does.
Gold does require. How are you going to go and buy a Starbucks coffee with? You're going to go there with a knife and try to shave it off a gold bar in a minuscule amount so that it amounts to the purchase. That's the whole reason currencies have been stood up on top of gold for millennia, is because it's not divisible like Bitcoin down to 10 to the negative 8th unit.
So how are you going to take a Bitcoin if Lightning Network can only support how many transactions per second and really isn't even stable, and we don't even know if it'll hold up?
Mark, what do you think?
100 million transactions per second actually in Lightning.
Okay, we can get there, right? Now everybody has to use.
Mark, what do you think the growth rate is on Lightning right now?
Oh, it's enormous because it's starting from a small base.
It's at 4% per week.
Yeah, it's enormous. It's starting from a small base.
Why do you think that's happening so abruptly all of a sudden?
Because it doesn't take many transactions, and you got El Salvador trying.
Bingo.
Yeah, trying, but it certainly hasn't been easy, right? And so you're seeing transactions. If you look at any blockchain, level 1 or level 2, when they introduce new applications, they all get tried out, particularly when you've got a lot of people work. But again, so let's just take your point. It's hard to shave, but you can convert into gold coins. And so just like you can have somebody mining, you can have somebody minting gold coins. A lot more, resources to do that, but they did it in the 1800s. They did it in the 1900s. So it's not possible.
Mark, to have a currency that's issued by a government that's backed by gold, it requires trust for the person to manage that ledger.
No one's talking now any more than they're talking about using Bitcoin on top of Lightning.
Yeah, but the difference, Mark, is whenever I open a channel on Lightning, I have an undefinitized contract that I write on the layer 1 so it can't be reused, right? Yeah. Like I could send you could download a Blue or Mun wallet right now. I could send you 1/4 of a cent, right? I could send it to you instantly and you would receive it. The fees are nothing, right? Like how are you running around? How are you running around on Ellen, right, promoting Dogecoin that settles in how many minutes, that is backed by nothing, right? That's not decentralized, that have 30,000 nodes all running it geographically distributed all over the planet. Like, to me, honestly, dude, like, you seem like a scammer.
Dude, did you watch you watched the whole thing?
Yeah, you were there by Dogecoin. It was so weird.
I said I've never promoted Doge as an ever.
But Mark, come on, you're not being honest with yourself. You went on there and you were like, "Hey, there's a lot." From what I remember, right? And who knows whether my memory on this is good or not? But like, you went on there and you were like, there's a lot of neat stuff happening in this crypto economy. There's Dogecoin. There's this, right? And it's like, dude, you have a platform. You have so many people that used to look up to you. Like,
I've been very consistent about Dogecoin, and I even said how much I own so that people didn't think it was an investment. I said it's better than a lottery ticket, correct?
Mark, why would you promote something that doesn't immediately settle, that doesn't have the decentralized piece like Bitcoin, right? That's the point. What are we solving? We're solving the total mutilation of pricing and interest rates on the planet. We're not solving some like clown coin thing. This is nuts.
Preston. Just real quick, Mark. What I think would be really interesting for a lot of people in here, just kind of as like a learning opportunity.
No. See, this is, you create a straw man, and then you stick behind it. Then you change subject. I'm not going to let that happen, right? So let's go back to Dogecoin. What is a great way to figure out a little more about crypto? A quarter, $2, $5, $10 on your Robinhood account and buy Dogecoin, or take a deep dive on Bitcoin. Okay, you can argue maybe Bitcoin's a better investment, is an investment, but the difference is with Dogecoin, you can learn about crypto. It's easy, it's stress-free, it's not trying to solve some big problem. And because it doesn't really appreciate a whole lot, It's really easy to spend and it has value. So because it's not a type of crypto that's designed to appreciate, started off as a joke, it's not trying to solve the trilemma, right? It's not trying to, save a fiat economy. It's just there. And because it's just there, and because sometimes it appreciates, it's more valid as a potential currency because it's easy to spend. As somebody who's been selling things for crypto going on 4 years, Doge only lasts months since last season, but crypto for years, nobody spends Bitcoin on anything for any reason.
Mark. So like when I'm reading your
Preston,
tweets,
shall I just come in there?
hold on one second, Peter. So like when I'm reading your tweets, Mark, like I truly thought like you were just scamming people, but like you actually believe this, and that's crazy to me. Like
No,
I can't wrap my head around how you're coming to the logic that you're saying right now. It's kind of insane.
it's
But at least I know you're not a scammer. Like you truly believe what you're saying. I can tell it in your voice.
Yeah, look, if I have $1,500 worth of Dogecoin, don't have a really lot of upside, do I? But I did it with my then 11-year-old son. This is how you learn crypto, right? This is an inexpensive way to see how crypto can transact. The people who buy Bitcoin, even those who are using the Lightning Network right now and growing at 4%, are going to be very, very hesitant to use it. Why? Because it's a store of value. And what is the expectation of store of values? You tell me.
Yeah, but Mark, what's happening is we're totally replacing the settlement layer here. Like
No, you're changing the question. What is the expectation of a store of value?
to save it.
And for it to go up in price, right? And so how often do you take an asset that appreciates and exchange that for just a normal good or
Well,
service?
to be honest with you, the other day on Twitter, I was tipping people $1 to $5 all over the place using the Lightning Network with my Bitcoin.
Preston, can I just come in here?
Yeah, you want to demonstrate, you want to support it, but for the majority of people, if they think an asset's going to double in price or triple in price, they're not going to spend it.
So, Mark, Peter, one last thing. So, Mark, are you tracking what Jack Mallers is doing? Because what he's doing is he's auto swapping fiat currency into the Bitcoin Lightning Network, transporting it down to El Salvador, and if people want to accept the local currency or dollars or whatever they want, it immediately swaps back into that currency. So he's using the Bitcoin rails, right, to conduct all of these transactions like time now over the network utility. And if the person wants to still receive fiat or whatever, it doesn't matter. He can immediately swap it right back into that. So what I think you're missing is the network's being used, even though people don't even know the network is being used.
So what you're missing is that now you're saying that Bitcoin is going to try to compete with Solidity compatible blockchains and L2s. And that, okay, now it's Lightning against optimistic rollups, against Polygon, against Cardano, against Solana. That's not a positive for Bitcoin. That's not a positive at all.
I'm going to jump in here now. Hi, Mark. My name's Peter. How are you?
Good, Peter. How are you?
Good. So a couple of things I'd just like to cover with you. I think trying to class Bitcoin as binary medium of exchange or store of value does Bitcoin a disservice itself. It's actually both. So just as an example, a couple of examples for you. I do use it as a store of value, but I'm based in the UK. A lot of my sponsors are in the US, and I invoice them using Bitcoin because it's a lot easier. And that Bitcoin settles in 10 minutes rather than going through the banking system. And I can provide examples and evidence of that for you. So and when that comes to the UK, I convert 75% into pounds and 25% stays in Bitcoin, and 75% to run my business. So just to try and say it's one or the other is as misleading. Also, just let me finish the point, and then just as somebody who's been to El Salvador a whole bunch of times, last time I was there when the Bitcoin law passed, And the great thing about going into El Salvador now is that I do use Bitcoin as a medium of exchange for two reasons. Firstly, if I want to use my debit card, a UK debit card, if I want to buy a cup of coffee or anything when I'm there, I always get charged a transaction fee, which is about £1, because that's the cost to move that amount of money from my UK account to whichever gets to that account. When I buy on the Lightning Network, it's instant, and the cost is a rounding error. And I'm happy to spend that kind of couple of pounds in Bitcoin. So I am using it as a medium exchange there. But also when I'm out there, I don't have to think about even getting dollars. So I just think to try and say it's one or the other is misleading, because Bitcoin is unique in that it can actually be both.
Well, first of all, it's not unique in that. And when you compare it only to fiat, it's really, really easy. It's just like when competitive blockchains only compare themselves to Ethereum. It's really, really easy. Oh my God, compared to Ethereum, it's faster, more transactions per second. You're not in a vacuum.
Mark,
So
do you know why people care what you think?
Well, wait, no, let's go back. You're changing subject.
Sorry, finish.
Let's go back and have a discussion on this, right? Bitcoin is not alone in doing this, right? So there's a variety of ways. You can go to a Mavs game and you BitPay, you can use a credit card. There's different alternatives that if you want to use direct pay, you can have far lower transaction costs. It happens instantaneously, all that stuff. That's not unique to Bitcoin.
It is to El Salvador.
Well, it is an
Yeah, so I'm just giving you a perfect example. I'm giving you an actual example.
That's great, but let's go to the Bahamas and look at Bitcoin Cash. It's been there for how long?
But there's no need to compare it to Bitcoin Cash, because Bitcoin Cash has no network effect. Nobody cares about it. So I'm just telling you.
You're hoping. So you're hoping that Bitcoin has a better network effect in El Salvador. You're hoping.
No, it has that network effect because I used it. Every retail environment I went into after September the 7th accepted Bitcoin. I went to Starbucks, I went to McDonald's, I went everywhere, and they accepted it.
And there's a lot of places that accept AMC Theaters accepts Dogecoin. It doesn't make it a network effect.
No, you've missed the point. Sorry, Mark. Sorry, you're missing the point here. What I'm saying is, what Bukele has done is he's bootstrapped a whole country so everyone accepts it. So it now works there. So I'm just telling you, when you say it's a store of value and not a medium of exchange, I'm telling you it's both.
What I'm telling you is, as long as, so a lot of things can have multiple features. I'll go back to gold. It can be used for industry. It can be used for jewelry. It can be used for a lot of things. The question becomes, what is its primary utilization? Bitcoin, without question, primary is store of value. Now, I understand that the Lightning Network creates new opportunity. In El Salvador, it is now required that they take Bitcoin in transactions. That's great. Now, they thought it was going to be the difference in the Bahamas for Bitcoin Cash. As you said, it didn't have the network effect. We'll see what happens in El Salvador. We'll see how it plays out.
Well, we'll see.
It's not a network effect yet, because there's demonstrations in the streets, and there's a lot of people who don't.
Okay. And let me just answer that point, because I was at the demonstrations, and I went to 3 demonstrations. At each one, there was less than 500 people there.
Okay, there you go. So they're small demonstrations. That's fine.
Yeah, and they are not anti-Bitcoin demonstrations. They're anti-Bukele demonstrations. If Bukele had made Bitcoin illegal, they would be demonstrated to have it legal.
I'm going to give you that. It's amazing, just incredible in El Salvador for Bitcoin. Just more amazing than we ever possibly imagined.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree. Wonderful. But there's also a fundamental problem.
What's that?
You got to buy the Bitcoin still. Now, mind, and because one of the Bitcoin problems is the only way really to organically earn Bitcoin is via mining it.
No, that's not true.
Otherwise, well, no, very few people. So it's got to start somewhere, right? Think of the progression. It's got to be mined first. Otherwise, it doesn't exist. Only 2 ways to acquire it, right? Or when it's first started. Somebody mines it or somebody buys it, correct?
No, incorrect.
Okay.
I just told you I get paid in Bitcoin.
No, of course you can get paid, but the question is, where did the person paying you, where did that original Bitcoin come from?
I don't understand why that matters.
It matters because if most transactions have to be sourced with a purchase of Bitcoin, that increases the cost. It increases the friction.
Okay, carry on.
Doesn't it?
No.
How's that different than anything else, though?
It's anything.
Oh, but I'm not saying it's different than a lot of other things, but if you're going to be unique, you have to be unique. You can't just dismiss it when the majority of transactions initiated are just like anything else. So,
Mark, here's what's Mark. This is what's unique. If you want, my humble opinion on what's unique, the fact that it is so decentralized compared to anything else, right?
so you're missing what you just said.
Look at what happened with the miners in China, right? China banned it.
Yep.
50% of the network went offline.
Yep.
It didn't miss a beat.
Yep.
And the reason China isn't trying to do more is because they can't. Because you got all these onion wrapped Tor nodes all over the entire planet that nobody can turn off. There's nothing they can do about it.
Bitcoin is a great store of value. But let's go back to El Salvador. So in the beach community where it worked great. And it worked great because all the Bitcoin that was introduced there didn't have to be purchased or mined. It was just distributed. And so El Salvador has got a fundamental problem in that they can use their volcanoes, I think it was, to create energy to do mining, but there's nowhere near enough Bitcoin generated. So in order for them, the government, to fulfill transactions, they're going to have to buy it, correct?
Yes.
No,
yes.
that's not
well,
correct.
kind
So
of.
very quickly, Peter, just there's hundreds of Chivo wallet ATMs that are distributed across the United States. A large part of El Salvador's GDP is based on remittances, right? And you're able to reduce the cost of those remittances using the Lightning Network, using Strike, using these companies. So it's not just a store of value, it's being able to transact that value in leveraging the digital form.
You're changing the subject, right?
What is the problem you're trying to identify here, Mark? I don't understand it. I'm sorry. Can you explain again?
The point is, it's not an organic Bitcoin economy if the majority of transactions in the country originate from purchased Bitcoin, because that introduces a lot of overhead and time.
We know that they are bootstrapping this, and what is that? I don't see.
So it's not an organic Bitcoin economy, and
why does that matter?
Until enough can be mined, and because it's a store of value, the miners are retaining Bitcoin. They don't pay as many They don't pay as many of the people they work with in Bitcoin because they don't want to lose the upside. So they hoard it, and they hoard it for a lot of reasons.
I'm not understanding what the problem is you're identifying here, though.
The problem is if you're trying to have an economy that works on Lightning Network, where there's going to be millions of transactions that you think are going to be low cost, you're ignoring the cost of getting the Bitcoin into the system. The only way.
But that is
Mark. That's
the
because
organic bit.
Mark, they're opening channels at a 4% rate. It's growing at a 4% rate per week. What are you talking about?
Go through the critical path from the mining of Bitcoin to a transaction. That's what I did. I said, okay, let's work backwards from a transaction. I want to buy a coffee and a coffee shop with Bitcoin in El Salvador.
Okay.
The first question is, how did I get my Bitcoin? Maybe somebody paid me for my wages. Then how did that payor, how did they get their Bitcoin?
So let's walk through that. Okay. So let's say you have the Strike app, which people down there have. And let's say they got paid in dollars. Okay.
No. You're changing the game again. You're changing the game.
I'm not going to change the game. I'm going to walk you right through it. Okay. So the person gets paid in.
I'm saying, okay, so go ahead. I'll let you finish. Go ahead. Got paid in dollars.
So the person gets paid in dollars, and let's say they go somewhere and they say, "Hey, I want to pay my my invoice." I go to McDonald's and I create a Lightning Bitcoin invoice, and I want to pay it. And on my Strike app, I only have dollars. Okay, I can click Bitcoin. I can click convert. I can then scan the Lightning invoice and then pay it instantly. Right? That's no friction whatsoever. Zero fees.
But that's not unique to Bitcoin. Starting with dollars converting to crypto, paying a transaction with no transaction fees is not unique. Now, the problem takes steps further back.
But
Now,
Mark, it destroys your whole thing about the friction of getting it in there and
no,
whatever point you were making before, which I'm not even following what the point is.
It confirms it because that dollar had to come from somewhere, and that dollar is dependent on the system that you think is broken. And so the majority of your transactions originate from a system you think is broken and has the cost associated with all of it, including inflation.
Yeah, it's a broken system because we're changing the monetary paradigm. It's the first monetary paradigm change in 400 years. And yeah, it's an emergent store of value.
You're changing the topic is what you're doing.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. Like, that's what you brought up, and I'm addressing the topic, right? The fact is we are still on a USD standard. That was your point. I'm addressing that point directly, and I'm saying during an emergent store of value phase and during the conversion of a monetary paradigm to a new monetary paradigm, these are the things that are going to happen.
Yeah, and where we disagree is that because everybody watching or listening on this thing, most of them want their Bitcoin to go up. They're going to be
okay. I'm going to disagree with you on this point, Mark. Whilst yes, of course, a lot of people do want their Bitcoin to go up. There's a lot of people I work with, or we work with in the Bitcoin space, who actually just want to see opportunity for people to have them a chance to hold an asset that will appreciate in value and not get debased.
I'm an investor.
And they want to have access to the banking systems. We're not all just merciless money grabbers.
Oh, no,
I think.
But he is. Look, I'm an investor in Axie Infinity and play to earn. Now, they'll make the argument that there are hundreds of thousands of people in the Philippines who are earning money every single day by playing this game and play to earn. And that if it takes off enough, then not just Axie, but what is it, SPS or SPL? I forget. Something Love Potion, SLPs, right, is going to be the de facto currency if it goes according to plan for them. The point is, there's challenges everywhere because it doesn't, unless the currency is created organically and there's no friction associated with it.
There's no friction from swapping back and forth anymore.
But this is a really important point. Talking about organic generation of the currency, Bitcoin had a divine conception of no one caring about it for 18 months before there was ever a market price. All of these other currencies are coming in now saying, hey, get on my cap table. You get in at really low pre-seed vesting prices, and then we get to launch it onto the market, and retail gets to buy it at 100x fold. That's the difference here. If you're talking about organic growth here, like Bitcoin came from nothing.
Yeah, I'm talking about today. And look, the guy who went down and provided the Bitcoin to the beach area, more power to him. What he did was great. It was a great test of UBI. It was a great test. Look, let me give you the answer that solves what I think is your problem. If El Salvador, the small country it is able to mine enough Bitcoin and becomes dominant in it because their cost of energy from their volcanoes is next to nothing, if not zero, approaching zero. And they can mine and they invent a new ASIC that just destroys everybody else. They truly can have a utopian economy built around Bitcoin.
Mark, I don't think anyone's looking for a utopian economy based around Bitcoin. They're looking for optionality.
You can't be talking about fiat and quantitative easing and the price of bonds and then say, okay, we want to keep having fiat as the foundation for most of our transactions.
We don't. We don't. But Mark, this is how I would tell you the equivalent of what you're describing, right? They have to keep printing. They have to keep interest rates low, right? These central bankers have no choice. They have to keep them. If interest rates would go up 200 basis points, the value of all equity on the entire planet would explode right now, right? So like they have to keep printing. They're going to try to push rates negative, and you know what? It's just going to keep bidding the price of this fixed number of units on Bitcoin. They're going to bridge the gap. They're going to keep the oil in the engine that's leaking, right? As we transition into this new system where there's a new clearance layer.
Preston, let me ask you a question. Do you think low interest rates is helping escalate the price of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies?
Of course it is.
Thank you. Okay, we agree on that. And so let me ask another question. How many different economic schools do you think there are?
I that broke up. How many what?
Different schools of economists do you think there are? Austrian, MMT, etc.
Yeah, there's a pile of them.
Yeah, and there's differences for a reason that disagree, right? MMT would tell you that you want to guarantee jobs and you can really spend. And right now, there's an argument to be made that that works because we're seeing the economy grow, but there's still all kinds of problems. So there's no point in arguing all that. Okay, that's a bad tangent. But there's still, I'm not against MMT yet because I think we undervalue intellectual property in this country. I think we undervalue crypto impact in this country. And as a result, we will be the ongoing reserve currency as long as we have that technological dominance, and we will be able to absorb a lot more debt because there's a lot more IP than we're valuing in GDP.
I think that this charade is going to continue until trust is completely eroded in the fiat-based system where quantitative easing is just totally oversaturated. I mean, look at Ray Dalio, one of the smartest people on the planet when it comes to these types of issues. Right?
Ray and I email on this shit, and I give him edits on his notes. So, yeah. I like and respect Ray.
Hey, Preston.
Yeah.
Hey, Preston, real quick. Mark, there's a ton of people in here that obviously are all pro Bitcoin, bullish on Bitcoin. I think that what's kind of getting lost in the conversation is I think you see Bitcoin, and correct me if I'm wrong, as a global store of value or one of the assets that is vying for that position. Is that fair?
Store of value on the planet. That's why I own it.
Okay. So help us understand, you get to kind of guide Bitcoin to go from that store of value that we all agree on to a currency that's used on a global basis or has, a kind of full global adoption. What do you think has to occur? We've done a lot of kind of back and forth in terms of things that we maybe disagree on. What do you think those steps are that would get us to a place that would actually have you say, yep, that checks the box, that's a medium of exchange on a global basis?
We have to have another 2017, and you have to have inflation.
And the reason for that is just that it pushes more people to adopt it, and you get from having a small minority of the global population holding it to now you've got either close to a majority or a majority.
It's not as good a store of value, and so it's not. People don't feel shitty when they spend it and it goes up $100 more, and they just realize they left $100 on the table.
Okay, so and this is something that I think most people in the Bitcoin community fully admit we don't yet know, but there's theories around this, is if Bitcoin continues to be adopted on a global basis and we go from estimates of, let's call it 100 to 150 million people around the world in crypto, many in Bitcoin, but unclear exactly what that breakdown is. But let's say 100, 150 million globally. If we started to get into 2, 3, 4 billion people actually holding the asset, the thought process is that the US dollar exchange price volatility would drastically subside. And at that point, if that US dollar exchange value price subsided from a volatility standpoint, more people started to use it. You think that's a viable path to get us from just a store of value to what would be a medium of exchange as well?
Yeah, and if the Mavs make every single shot they take, we'll be undefeated.
That would be a good plan.
Yeah. The problem with that perspective is you've got a lot of other cryptocurrencies, and I don't even like to call them currencies, crypto platforms. Let's just call them networks, platforms, that are competing with you, that have their own value and differentiation, that are more consumer friendly and more transaction likely.
Here we go. Here's when I'm going to come in. Okay, so firstly, they're not really competing, Mark. I know you think they are, but let me ask you something about this.
Wait. Take a step back to what you said. I've invested in hundreds of businesses. I've started tens of businesses, and pretty much all of but maybe one or two have worked that I've started. All right? And the one thing an entrepreneur has to learn not to do is lie to themselves and think they're infallible. Because every single business I've ever seen where the people who are leading the charge think it's infallible have failed. And so if you think you're infallible, it ain't going to work. Because
I didn't say that. I just said they're not competing.
Yeah, well, not having any competition is kind of the equivalent of saying you're infallible.
Bro, no one leads the network. It's decentralized, bro. We don't have any leaders here. That's the whole point of Bitcoin.
Welcome.
Anyway, let me
leading
go because what I wanted to ask you, Mark, is
Go ahead.
so you said that one of the problems that Bitcoin has is that people hold it and they don't want to spend it because they're worried about it going up in value.
Correct.
Okay. Why are people buying Dogecoin? Because they think it's stable?
No, because it's fun. They're part of a community. They have fun with it. It's like going to an amusement park and they have a chance to make some money. And if they're not going to make any money, they can go buy Mavs gear or something else. They can go to an AMC movie. It's fun.
Losing money isn't fun. Nobody likes losing money. I would say, just a rough estimate, that 100% of people buying Dogecoin are doing it because they think it's going to go up in value, because they hear you talk about it on Ellen or Elon Musk talk about it on SNL.
No,
SNL?
when you hear me talk about it, I compare it to a lot. I say it's better than a lottery ticket. I say it's a cheap way to learn crypto. I say it's a fun community to be part of. People love to tweet and on Instagram and on TikTok talk about going to the moon and do memes. It is
going
fun.
to the moon because they want it to go up.
It's fun, but it's fun. And
when it goes up,
you don't have to spend a lot of money to play. You get a Robinhood account, you open it up, $25, and you can spend. My son, my 12-year-old son, I trade for him. He'll spend $6 on fuck around with it and talk about it with his friends and love every minute of it. It's the cheap price of admission. And then he can use that money now that Robinhood's opened up their wallet just to walk up and spend it at AMC or at a Mavs game. That's fine.
Okay, I mean, pretty much everything you've described, he could equally do with Bitcoin.
No, you can't. No, you cannot. You can't.
You can buy $25 worth and you can have fun with it.
Actually, you can do something a whole lot better. You can buy a Raspberry Pi and teach them how to put it together, and then load $100 worth of Bitcoin into, and he can open a channel.
Yeah, he's already mining Ethereum, so he's set there. But now we'll see what happens when they go to proof of stake, and we've had that discussion. But
Mark, I got a question for you if you want to entertain it. When you look at this bond market, right, and it's all compressed down to nothing percent, how do you see that ending?
I think, they'll ease. They'll increase interest rates slowly as the market allows them to. The price of stocks will go down. There'll be a correction of some sort, like there always is, and then things will balance out.
So as the entire planet is levered to their eyeballs right now, and interest rates are at nothing percent, you think that central banks, you actually believe central banks are able to raise interest rates and that the economy could handle that?
Okay, so first, let's dissect what you just said. You actually believe that central banks, so you're creating a boogeyman, right? When I talk about man, person, myth, person, legend, you're creating a myth that these guys don't know what they're doing and there's no chance that they could ever possibly get it right. That's not the case, right?
Then they should be able to stop QE and let interest rates, a free and open interest rate environment occur, correct?
No, not unless you want a lot of starvation.
Yeah, so they can't stop manipulating the market, is what you're saying.
So, trying to keep people healthy, trying to make it so that we don't have a depression is a valid effort. And so you're not, the last time they went laissez-faire, and I'm not an economist, and I don't know if any of you guys are either, but as I remember, it was 1929 because Herbert Hoover said we can't interfere. And we learned a lot of lessons. And so I don't think just being laissez-faire is the way to go.
And so I don't want the world to suffer, but what happens if something steps in a decentralized way and starts supplying the pressure of a decentralized, uncontrollable system that it doesn't matter how much they want to manipulate it, it won't matter because what's supplanting it is taking over.
So you guys look, like I wrote in my little tweet storm that right before this, you guys do a great, great job of selling the legend, selling the myth. What if? These guys are idiots. The central banks are idiots. The amount of debt is crushing. Fiat, you're losing every second of every day because of inflation. It's not that it's not based on truth. But let me give you an alternative. What if, using AI, artificial intelligence, we increase productivity 20%?
And you're just doing exactly the same. You're literally selling a new myth.
Yes, exactly. That's my point.
Well, this is an interesting point. Peter Thiel makes this point
No,
about
it's not.
the 21st century is going to be Bitcoin and free open markets versus AI top-down communism. And it's funny that that's like that's Peter Thiel's point. That's Peter Thiel's point. That's not. I'm talking about.
Well, bro, because of Moore's law and computing power, we're already doing that. The issue is the central bank debasement's going against that. So you're talking about something that's already been happening. Technological innovation's been happening for the last 50 years because of Moore's law. It's downstream of that. It's been happening, and we're doing it. We're doing it. It's central bank printing that's getting in the way of it. That's what's going on.
Okay, so let's talk economics. And again, I'm the first to admit I'm not an economist, so any economist can rip me to shreds. But if we devalue the currency X amount, but we increase productivity by more than that amount, and or grow the economy by more than that amount, can you grow the economy so that interest rates can be increased gradually and it works?
You're fighting an uphill battle. You don't have to do that. If you have a deflationary currency and if the technology is naturally deflationary, they're running in the same direction. That's what's going on. Right now, they're fighting against each other. It's two opposing forces. It does not have to be this way.
Hey, Mark, you mentioned earlier that you were proofed Ray Dalio's his releases. Ray's saying nothing of the sort. So how are you editing his emails, like you said earlier?
Editing was probably the wrong way. I give him my feedback and tell him what I think, and some he uses, some he doesn't. Right?
But he totally disagrees with you.
What's that? Oh yeah, he disagrees with me on a lot of different things, but he's a great historian, and I respect everything that he says. But he hedges by owning some Bitcoin because he's the first to admit that he doesn't fully understand it. But I want to go back to what you said in relationship to AI, because you just kind of skipped over it. AI is not dependent on Moore's law. AI is dependent on so many other things, and we're just touching the surface. If you look at the most valuable companies in the world, they're all great at AI. If you look at the most pressing need that we have as a country, it's not our debt burden. It's how do we compete globally, and the foundation for that competition is AI. Now, there's no correlation or causation between AI and Bitcoin at all. And if I had my druthers between AI, and there are some risks, increasing our productivity or just doing things to increase our productivity 5, 10, 15%, I'll take that over Bitcoin taking over our economy every single time. And you guys dismiss it as being no chance, just like I dismiss
No, it's not binary. That's not what I'm saying, or that's not what no one is saying up here. It's not binary. These forces can work in the same direction, or they can work in opposite directions. Right now, they're working in opposite directions because of central bank debasement. Yes, they are. Mark, you're wrong. They are working in opposite directions. Dude, how are they not working in opposite directions? Right? You just said. Here's what you said. You said that if productivity can outpace printing, it does good. But it doesn't have to be that way. You're right. That's a true statement. But it doesn't have to be that way. They can work and go in the same direction, and that's what a sound monetary standard does. It's not an either or.
So put a timeline on when you think Bitcoin can be integrated to the point that it is a replacement for the central bank.
Mark, can I ask you a quick question? And also, can I just make another point?
I'll answer his question within 10 years, Mark.
Okay. So within 10 years, I don't think that's marginally feasible, but okay, let's just say it is. What do you think is going to happen with AI? And if we increase that productivity enough to overcome all the spending, do you think people will just say, well, we don't need Bitcoin yet?
Okay, so this is where I want to ask some questions, but before I do that, I just want to make a point. We're lucky enough to have Lynn Alden in the room. I really think she should be up here as a speaker because
I keep asking her and she won't come up.
Oh, Lynn, come on. Anyway, Mark.
I invited Lynn, Peter. I invited her.
Let's try and get her up. So, Mark, just on that point then, can you just explain to me so I can understand, how does AI increase productivity by 20x? Can you just give me an example? And where does that money go, and how does that get distributed to the people who need it?
Well, it depends where you use it. It can be used in government so that government can be more effective in government as a service. We're starting to see some of that in the military. It hasn't really spilled over, but over the next 10 years, that's our time frame. If you look at supply chain, it's now starting to be integrated. I have companies that are integrating into supply chain so that we can optimize supply chain. Look at what Apple does with it. why do you
Look
think?
how well that's working right now.
Well, it's because it's being introduced now because of all the problems that are being created with the supply chain. That's how people are responding to the problem.
I think you're actually selling a bigger myth here, because you say we're selling a myth, but we're not really.
I totally
We're just
agree, Peter.
we're telling a story about something that is actually working, which is provable. We can prove it's actually working on a micro and a macro scale. You're selling a myth whereby you think we'll get a 20x increase in
No,
productivity because of AI. I think that's a much larger myth, and it's quite
no,
disingenuous.
I use that as a hypothetical, right? I didn't say we will get a 20x, but I can tell you that if you talk to anybody who's literate in AI, they'll think they can do more.
I just think you're
So-
just throwing out the buzzword AI, and we're just totally avoiding the real conversation, which
Oh,
is central banks.
I'll tell you,
Mark,
go get your
Mark.
AI expert and bring up your AI expert. I'm not going to be an expert, but I fucking took all the time it took to be able to create neural networks and
So, you know what, Mark? Some of us have also taken the TensorFlow course on Google and set up deep neural nets and played around with it. Like, I get it, right? I see it. It's a talking point, right? But at the end of the day, central banks cannot stop QE. That's the point. Lynn's up here. Lynn, tell us your opinion. Can central banks stop doing QE, or are they in a do loop that they have to keep taking rates low, or else everything implodes?
I think they can stop for a period of time. They can do another cycle probably, but they'll be kind of put back into the same track they've been on for the past decade.
So, like 5-10 years, Lynn, can they stop doing what they're doing?
No, structurally, I don't think they're going to be able to do that for quite a while. They're going to have to believe at least real rates are going to be negative for, I think, a pretty persistent period of time.
Okay, I'm not going to argue with that.
See, the point is, Mark, is that you've been very successful and you're a gazillionaire, and it doesn't really affect you the way it affects a lot of other people. And as somebody who's worked alongside many of the great people in this spaces, we understand how Bitcoin has actually given people optionality, people who don't really have much, and a chance to actually save, and if they're patient, to increase the value of what they have. But whatever level of inflation, you're still going to be able to fly a private jet and buy players for your team, and it doesn't really affect you. There's no, you're not compelled to really care about this, and I think that's why you can have a bit of fun with Dogecoin. And if people get wrecked and lose all their money, it doesn't really affect you. But we're seeing work on the ground that's being done globally on a macro scale and also on a micro scale in different communities where Bitcoin is literally changing people's lives. And the thing is, it's a real shame because you have a platform, you have a big audience. And if you actually did the work like the people in this room have done it, you would understand what this could do for people. Yet you seem to be more interested in promoting what are essentially scams and complete shitcoins. It's quite sad, really, mate.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Wait, who was I talking to? Is that Peter?
Yeah, it's me, mate.
Okay. Go to markcuban.com and look at all the companies I'm invested in, and look at all the entrepreneurs that I work with, and all the employees that I have that I work with. And then read a little bit about my history. And you think this is all about, well, I'm rich, I can't relate. Fuck you. Right? I've been sleeping on the floor. I've been so fucking broke, I had holes in my floor. Right? I don't need to go back there to understand and remind myself. And I work with people that are trouble, you name it. Right? I don't need to defend myself because I make a point to help people. That's why I'm on Shark Tank. Not because I'm trying to make more money, because I'm trying to encourage people to go out and start their own businesses. And you do what maxis do, Peter, by deflecting. Well, you can't understand this. You can't do this or that. You're fucking like Elizabeth Warren.
I mean, that's just really disingenuous.
You know,
Hey, Mark,
Mark,
I'll give you this. I agree with what Peter said, but at the same time, I can agree with your comeback, right? And you know what? You being in this room right now, just battling out with us, says so much about you that I appreciate, right? So, like, kudos to you to step in here and battle with us on a Saturday night so that 10,000 people can listen in on this, right? But at the same time, I agree with what Peter's saying. I don't think you've done the hard work to understand this, and I think that you got a lot of stuff going on, right, man? Like you got a lot of stuff. I got it. But I think you need to dig into this way more than what you've done. Just my personal opinion.
Okay, so you gave me typical maxi dismissal, right? Coins. They're all shit coins. Everything, you're wrong. And that could be the undermining of Bitcoin as much as anything. But you know what? There are other that are good. And for a lot of applications, they're a whole lot better. And while everything that you've told me about the future of Bitcoin is reliant on net lightning, it's growing 4%. I can walk in anywhere in El Salvador. It's not alone. They're way ahead of you, right? There's other networks, other applications, other platforms way ahead of you. And now they're also coming up with other applications. Put aside the collectibles market and people I know buying rocks and crypto punks and all that, trying to make money. That's great. More power to them, right? There's I like them. But at the same time, that's just the proof of concept. All the NFT smart contract stuff on all the platforms, that's just proof of concept for all the other applications.
Mark, do you you called us you called a couple of us maxis now.
Let me just.
Do you understand? No, I just want to say, because do you understand the difference between Bitcoin and all these other networks? Because it's like going to, like, if I asked you about which car to buy and then you presented me a bicycle.
No,
they're fundamentally different, because I know they all exist, but Bitcoin and crypto are very different. Do you understand the difference between Bitcoin and crypto? Because it's a real fundamental point. Because if you don't, this conversation is kind of
Preston,
it's a bit pointless.
Here, and Peter, you're very, very clear about the decentralization and the nodes and what happened in China being exemplary and how that decentralization is protecting. I understand it very well. What I also understand is why and how consumers buy. Also understand how businesses try to improve their productivity. And remember the story I told about the early days of the internet with starting streaming, when everybody would just laugh. Why the fuck would I, do something with the internet? Why would I do anything with the internet when I can just turn on a TV? Everybody laughed. When I started the first all high definition television, everybody laughed. No one's going to buy these 25, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm used to going against the grain. And let me just tell you, people will follow the path of least resistance for the application they want to use. They listen. Myth.
I've got something good to put to you then, Mark.
Do
you think? Just give me this one, Rob, and then I'll hand over, because I know I'm dominating. Mark, do you think within the next 5 years that any other cryptocurrency will become legal tender in a country?
It's possible.
Do you want to make a bet on it? I bet you 100 grand right now that it doesn't happen within 5 years.
Oh, no, because I think if it works at all for El Salvador, then another small country will adopt it. Why wouldn't they?
So you do understand the fundamental difference. Comparing crypto to Bitcoin is comparing cars to bicycles. They're completely different things.
I don't understand.
Yeah, but guys, hold on 1 second. I think this whole entire conversation is kind of getting off track here a little bit. And look, I've talked to Mark about this, not a lot, but enough where I think I kind of understand his thought process. And obviously, most people up here I respect. I spend a lot of time with you guys. My big takeaway from this entire conversation is there's way more agreement than there is disagreement. And, Mark, you correct me if I'm missing something here, but what I take out of this is everyone on this stage agrees that Bitcoin is a store of value. Mark owns Bitcoin. Everyone else up here owns Bitcoin. Everyone agrees that it's a store of value. We also all agree that there is a potential path to Bitcoin becoming a global medium of exchange. I think the major difference is Mark assigns very, very small probability to that occurring. Most people up here assign a much higher probability to that. And then the last big point is everyone up here from the Bitcoin community is talking about Bitcoin as a monetary asset, right? A store of value, eventually a medium of exchange. Mark is bringing up the point that other pieces of technology that are competing for technology applications, et cetera. And I think most people in the Bitcoin community would say, yeah, they're very different, right? Ethereum or Solana or any of these other things are trying to solve a completely different problem. And Mark, if I remember correctly, at the beginning of the conversation, you said, look, Bitcoin has no competition from a store of value standpoint, but it's just these other platforms that are, quote unquote, further ahead in terms of serving various applications. Is that kind of a fair summary of where everyone is?
What you left out was that store of value, being good at store of value, acts as a boat anchor for everything else, because people want to use it for that. It also opens up the door for other applications to do what Bitcoin expects to do, because again, I'll use Axie Infinity. And look, there's lots of things right and lots of things wrong about what they're doing in the Philippines as an example, right? But the people in Philippines aren't clamoring for Bitcoin. They're clamoring for SLP. right? And they're clamoring to get sponsors to play Axie Infinity, because that's the organic currency that they can earn. And that currency, isn't necessarily a currency, but it can be distributed organically because they actually create it themselves. So the point being, you're going to be competing with a lot of other platforms for a lot of different applications. Now let's take it one step further. Let's just say, all the things that have happened with fintech get disintermediated by DeFi. All the things that we've seen with smart contracts, with NFTs, get applied to any number of other applications, so that there are 2 or 3 competing other platforms that people are using and buying those tokens for, because they need to use those applications.
So Mark, this is a really interesting point, because I think that most people don't make the analogy, but I would go as far as to say what Axie Infinity is doing is analogous to, let's say, Uber early on paying drivers and riders and kind of subsidizing growth. At some point, if that subsidy goes away, is your belief that the audience or the user base will kind of move on to the next thing? Or is the thought process that these applications will attempt, similar to Web 2 technologies or platforms, to build enough of a network effect to stay and hold people without having to continue to have that subsidy?
Depends how big the gets. So the game for Axie Infinity is if they get a big enough community that people, by advertising, they sell intellectual property outside the community, so that external money comes in, and then that external money is enough to support the gameplay and the subsidies can leave, they win. That's the bet. That is
Got it. And so I guess the big question is, if you think of the Bitcoin network, mining obviously is a subsidy to some degree to get people to come onto the network from a mining standpoint. Really what El Salvador is doing is, with the state-backed fund, they're creating a subsidy as well to get Bitcoin into people's hands. Your point, I think, is just, hey, how much do they actually need via either mining it or buying it in the market to seed into their economy in order to actually get the network effect, where then the government can kind of take their foot off the gas pedal and the people then now use Bitcoin in the economy without that subsidy?
almost. Because the problem is, if you get the network effect, there isn't enough Bitcoin that can be mined within El Salvador. So the perfect scenario in my mind,
it's infinitely divisible, though.
No, that's not the issue. Of course, it's infinitely divisible. All cryptocurrencies are at least 18 decimals divisible. So that's not the issue, right? The issue is, if they grow the perfect event, that's what I was talking about. The perfect scenario is they can mine enough, the government can mine enough Bitcoin to pay all their bills organically in Bitcoin without ever having to purchase dollars or any other currency to use that to buy Bitcoin. That's the ultimate, because at that point in time, the whole economy is run and managed by Bitcoin, because so much of the employment is government based. Then the people that they mine the Bitcoin, they pay their employees in Bitcoin. Those people buy their coffee in Bitcoin. You don't need to be dealing with all the exchange fees, and you don't need to be dealing with the currency translation fees. And you probably need to transfer from Bitcoin to some other USD or some other fiat. Or
just a circular economy at that point.
Yeah, it's self-fulfilling economy. But if they can't, and
Mark,
the demand is there.
Just the thing to keep in mind, though, is that since Bitcoin works with proof of work, you need to have energy, and not all countries have large energy silos that they're able to trade. So they need to be able to trade other goods and services for that Bitcoin. And just because they're not able to generate, if they're energy poor as a country, doesn't invalidate the thesis, since it's not a full circular economy if they're not mining on site. They can trade goods and services for energy that's being produced in Texas, right?
No,
you can have miners in Texas generate the Bitcoin, and you trade the goods and services to bring that Bitcoin into that economy.
That's fine, but it's going to be priced on dollars. But let's just say, for the sake of example, they can buy some percentage of their goods, and they can buy some percentage of they can barter for some percentage of their Bitcoin in El Salvador using goods and services, right? I forget what their number one resource is, but let's just say they only sell that for Bitcoin, and that increases the amount of Bitcoin that they have available to them organically. the more the demand for Bitcoin, if that demand for Bitcoin outstrips the availability, the organic availability of Bitcoin, then you have effectively a QE set of circumstances where they have to go out there and figure out a way to buy a currency, most likely USD, in order to buy more Bitcoin to satisfy the demand. And if they have to buy more Bitcoin to satisfy the demand, what happens to the price of Bitcoin? And if the people who are holding Bitcoin keep on holding it, given that there's a finite supply with no inflation, there, you could get to a point where everybody just arbs the shit out of El Salvador by saying nobody sell, right? Which you hear a lot in Bitcoin anyways. And the price, the price inflation accelerates more dramatically than they can afford, and they have to go away from Bitcoin.
And then all citizens that are holding Bitcoin in their account or have chosen to denominate their savings in Bitcoin are upset.
No, but the rest of the world is happy, but all the people who couldn't afford, because you talk about me not being able to relate to people who can't afford to save anything. What do you think all those people in El Salvador who don't have the ability to save are thinking? And what they're saying
They're
and
probably thinking I need to get my hand on a smartphone or get my kids to get a smartphone so that I can start denominating my savings in Bitcoin.
Again, this is another myth. If you had Michael Peterson here from El Zonte, that's one of the things I thought when I went down to El Salvador. I thought people wouldn't be able to save because they don't have any money. And he actually explained, no, it's actually all relative. Whereas we might be sitting there thinking, oh, I'm not going to buy that TV because I want to buy Bitcoin and save. People in El Salvador, down in Zonte, what they're doing, they might not be buying a can of Coke or a beer and they're saving. But people in El Zonte who are, it's a third world country. Some of the poorest people are starting to save. There is that one guy, I can't remember his name, he was just gradually saving bits and bits of Bitcoin over time, and he eventually got his teeth done, and he's buying a cow. And it sounds funny, but it's the truth. Is that the reason they don't save is they had no incentive to save because their money wasn't appreciated in value, and they didn't have the technology to save because they didn't have bank accounts. So even the poorest people now in El Salvador are starting to save. So sorry, that's just another myth.
Okay, first of all, anecdotal stories are amazing. You can't take.
No, it's true. People are now saving there. You speak to Michael Peterson.
I believe you. 100% believe you, but you have to look at it on a macro basis. And the people outside El Salvador will benefit more. So let me change it as a question. Are there going to be more Bitcoin holders outside of El Salvador or inside of El Salvador?
Of course, outside of El Salvador, because there's 6 million people there and there's 8 billion on the planet.
They're the ones that are going to be playing the ARB game saying, okay, now we're looking at the payments that the El Salvador government has to make. We see that they're bartering from Texas, right, to get Bitcoin to pay some of it, but they're going to have to buy, because I get this all the time and you guys hear it all the time. So-and-so is going to buy X hundreds of millions of dollars of Bitcoin for their treasury. So let's buy now because the price is going to go up. So-and-so, there's going to be an ETF. So let's buy now because tomorrow this ETF goes gold, hopefully, and more people are going to buy. When you all of a sudden find out El Salvador has $100 million in bills they have to buy Bitcoin for, what do you think is going to happen and who's going to benefit?
So, Mark, what is your thought process? A couple of years ago, I think it was Pierre Rochard wrote a piece talking about like a speculative attack on Bitcoin. You could look at something maybe like a Michael Saylor has done, where he's basically borrowing money at incredibly low interest rates that depreciates, rather rapidly, converts it into Bitcoin. So he's trading, kind of bad money for good money, if you were to ask him about it. And a nation state obviously has the ability to print money. El Salvador doesn't because they're dollarized. But if there was another nation state that got in this situation and they just said, rather than go to the market and buy Bitcoin with the dollars on our balance sheet, we're literally just going to print, 500 billion, $1 trillion of our bad money and convert it into Bitcoin in one big purchase. Is that a viable path for a nation state, or is that going to be kind of front run as well?
I think it's a viable path, and I think they do it differently. They'd go and buy as much hash rates as they possibly can and threaten what they couldn't buy. So China made a mistake by kicking them out. They should have kept them in and kept control of them like they did with all the other technology.
Agreed.
So if China gets enough hash rate so they can get to 51% and say, live or die, there goes your family, what happens to Bitcoin if they get to 51%?
Yeah. Well, now they're down, sub 5% on a global basis. The US is the leader with 35% of hash rate as of right now. I guess, and I just want to bring it full circle because this all started with the thread Avik wrote in the National Affairs article just saying, hey, America should embrace Bitcoin. What's your take on what should America do? Is it just allow the free market and kind of private participants to, play it out? Should the US actually do something here?
Yeah, with Bitcoin, they don't have to do anything. They just let it be. It's just a store of value like gold. And look, one of the great lies of gold is that it's physical ownership. Nobody, other than people who own coins, nobody owns physical gold, right? It's just a digital transaction on a ledger somewhere. And then it trades in the futures market and people settle. No one physically owns it. It's actually not, from that perspective, it's not all that different. Maybe not Bitcoin 100% analogy because of the inflation rate difference, but the fact that there is no inflation in Bitcoin. But the reality is, there isn't gold being delivered very often except for industrial and jewelry applications.
That's because it's expensive to do physical settlement, unlike Bitcoin.
Well, yeah, it's expensive, but there's no reason to do it. It may be expensive, but so what? No one's going to do it.
If people thought there was going to be a run on gold, they would want to own physical gold.
Doubt it. Well,
no, I agree with you, and that's why I don't own it. But
people runs on. The myth, the person, the legend. It's all around gold, just like a lot of the stuff you guys are talking about now on Bitcoin.
Well, Mark, if I may, you mentioned Solana earlier, right? As these other currencies and these other platforms, that's a different market structure where you have a large amount of VCs coming in and backing something at an early seed round, being able to get tokens before they're ever publicly available at 4 cents, and then it gets listed on an exchange, and then exchanges have massive abilities, basically from a market dynamic, to basically effectively dump on retail, right? It's a bit of a different market structure in that sense. And additionally, Solana had to have a bunch of node runners meet on Discord because the chain broke, and all of the complexity we're talking about for these elaborate features that differentiate away from Bitcoin are Achilles heels and introduce centralization again, which, if the whole innovation here is that we've solved the Byzantine general problem, we've actually brought decentralization here. The idea that you have to have this elite class of people who have privileged access to the network who actually truly set the rules. It doesn't matter what other bells and whistles you have on top of it. All of the complexity is a liability when it comes to actually doing the computation and the actual innovation. And that actually is a detractor away from everything else.
Okay, so let me respond to that. So first, like I said in my tweet storm, that there are a lot of blockchains, L1s and L2s, and a lot of them are going to go belly up. It is a death war right now. But you're wrong when you say that Bitcoin doesn't have those complexities, because there are assets like wrap Bitcoin. And those assets are being held simultaneously and traded and fall right within those same ecosystems.
But they have custodians. They're centralized. That's the exact trade-off. That you lose the decentralization, and with the trade-off of becoming centralized and a custodian holding that WBTC on your behalf, you can do all the crazy things you want, but you just reinvented modern banking all over again. There's a custodian.
Yeah, no question about it, right? I agree with you there. But again, look, Solana is a bad example because for a lot of reasons. We don't need to litigate Solana, right? But there are good ones, right? There are ones that are working well. And that, again, I'll keep on repeating this. Right now, what's happening, I'll go from the consumer perspective. And a friend of mine, a good friend of mine that I respect a lot, and I used to go back and forth in this all the time. You have to look at it from the consumer perspective. Consumers are going to find applications that they really like and that are easy to use, right? And where those applications are hosted, they're going to be the winners if they're able to sustain themselves. And it doesn't matter what we think about Bitcoin. It doesn't matter about the decentralization. I don't want to get everybody all hyped. So I just made a bunch of people's blood boil by saying it doesn't matter about the decentralization.
It sure did.
Yeah. Take a step away from that, right? So what I'm saying is, the consumers don't pay attention to the intricacies. I was listening to something and they were talking about, don't sell the recipe, sell the brownie, right? The consumers buy the brownies, and they focus on the brownies that work for them. They don't think about the recipe at all. And so if enough people are buying different brownies and love the brownies, and those brownies may not be quite as decentralized as you would like, they're going to ignore that fact and keep on buying those brownies. Stupid analogy, but lots of people will tweet that that's a dumb analogy, but it's the best I can think of.
But Mark, I think that there's a hint of truth here, right? In the sense that the Bitcoin community points at Ethereum, let's say, and says, hey, Ethereum's not as decentralized. There's a bunch of incentives that are going to make it more centralized over time. We saw over the last 12, 18 months, Binance Smart Chain pops up, much more centralized than Ethereum, according to the Ethereum community, but faster throughput, cheaper fees. Some developers, not all, but some developers moved over, and you could argue that they didn't care about decentralization because they just wanted faster throughput, cheaper fees. You then see Solana, yada, yada, right? So there's a whole bunch of these examples where this happens. I think the place where the Bitcoin community kind of draws the line in the sand is there are very specific applications where decentralization really matters, and Bitcoin is the most decentralized and the one most likely to get more decentralized over time. I think what you're saying is actually something different, which is the end user and also the developers in all of the other use cases where decentralization is not the most important thing, like with Bitcoin. Everyone just wants the best user experience, the cheapest fees, the highest throughput, et cetera, right?
Matt, they just want the application that they want, right? That's it.
Yeah, they want it to work. They want it to work, essentially.
Yeah, and they're willing to accept a certain level of risk that Bitcoiners may not be willing to accept because it might get a lower price. It might, okay, again, blood pressure goes up, lower price. Okay, I heard you already. But there'll be an application that's sold in a manner that they want to consume it, and that gets them to commit to what they're doing. And so if enough, there's a race going on. The whole foundation of the non-store value applications that everybody's mentioned is built on Lightning, correct? Lightning is the base for everything. So it's Lightning.
It's discrete log contracts, which are doing contracts for difference on the Bitcoin base chain right now, being able to actually have distributed futures markets with being able to create your own oracles on base chain, right? And as opposed to having it, so it's a little bit nuanced in that, but I'll let you keep on going. Like,
so more than one, right? So there's more than one application platform, right? But you're competing between those couple, Lightning and the others, with thousands. And there's so much money going into those thousands that it's being subsidized, right?
Just because the money's flowing into it doesn't mean that the capital is being allocated in a meaningful and smart way. So
you're right.
Like when I look at the amount of liquidity that's being pumped into this system and the malinvestment that's there and the zombie companies that exist on the planet right now, it's almost making your eyes bleed, right?
But
so
the flip side of that is, you said it doesn't mean that they're going to be successful. You're right. But it also doesn't mean they're not going to be successful.
No, and I agree with that. There might be. But my concern, Mark, is the order of events that are going to play out here, right? My opinion, which I suspect is very different than your opinion, is that the store of value is going to drive a wedge into the fixed income market and expose this quantitative easing that can't be turned off, that's now even being transmuted into UBI plus quantitative easing. And it's going to drive a wedge into that, and it's going to get to this point where people are saying, you know what? I'm not going to sign up for this bond contract that guarantees the loss of my nominal principal because it yields a negative rate, right? I think that we're at a breaking point with how far everything's been stretched in the fixed income space. And when you look at the size of that market, this is a $300 trillion market cap for fixed income around the world. 18 to 20 trillion of that being negative yielding debt already today, right? When we look at the market size of Bitcoin, it's a pittance. So now if you're sitting on a bond desk, right, and you got this massive amount of buying power, that has to go somewhere, and it has to go somewhere that you actually trust, right? Are you going to go to some protocol that's sort of somewhat decentralized? Or are you going to go to something that hasn't changed a lick in a decade that has a 21 million fix, right? So the order of events is, I think, the part that you and I have a major disagreement on things progressing. On the other side of all this, right? Well, maybe some of this other stuff does pop out of it. Maybe there is a reason to have these decentralized contracts that now I don't go to Robinhood anymore, where I'm already getting free trades, and I go somewhere else, right? Maybe there's a desire for that, and there's a 10x advantage to move in that direction. But the 10x advantage I see today is the fixed income market is beyond repair.
Okay, so Preston, let me respond to that. What percentage of Yin's guys understand what nominal interest rates are?
Does it matter?
Yes.
Why?
For the same reason that people just keep on putting money into their savings accounts.
Yeah, but Mark, look what's happening right now. We got a 10-year Treasury at 1.5%, and we got 6 months of CPI.
Preston,
we got 6 months of CPI prints at 5.5%, right? So now people are being incentivized to not even pay down their house. They're incentivized to take out a 100-year loan because they'll make a 300 basis point return by just having the loan itself.
And Preston,
yeah, but Preston, I think Mark's point is that we're operating in that world, assuming that there's financial education. Or you get remember, 45% of Americans don't even own an investment.
I don't think this thing called Bitcoin cares whether anybody understands it or not.
Yeah, I think Preston. So let me reframe. One of the ways to think about this is who own, like, the market volume is driven by larger players, and I think it was Preston maybe who was making this point earlier. If you think about the risk reward ratio and the classic capital markets line, all these asset allocators are being forced out of cash and bonds to take on more risk in equities, and they've all these endowment funds and things have gone into private equity and venture capital, not because that's a good place. It's because they need to do things like make that trade-off between illiquidity and in order to generate those returns. There's all kinds of analysis that comes out week after week by these research people that says, hey, you know what? In the 1980s, you could make 7.5%, which is like the return amount that all these endowments have just by investing in various debt instruments. And today, you need a mix of all kinds of different equities and things like that. So institutional investors, which control the vast majority of capital, are having these conversations. High net worth individuals, which control a ton of capital, are having these conversations. There's some crazy ratio of 10% of Americans own 80% of the stocks. So those really well-educated people who can move the market with investment decisions are definitely talking about things that Preston's talking about with the inflation. Even the people who aren't particularly educated on nominal interest rates and things like that, groceries are elevated 25% plus. The official government economist was on TV saying there's no inflation as long as you exclude the price of pork, beef, and chicken, which is what people care about. If you go to Home Depot, I had a project, all the shelves, they have a list of things that are missing from that shelf this week. So I think that some of these inflation concerns, they may sound conspiracy theory or Bitcoin maxi, but I think people are seeing it day to day now.
Here's what you're missing. Bitcoin's not the only alternative to solve those problems. And so all that money is not only looking at Bitcoin, but they're going through the same process that I do, right? Why do I like Ethereum and some of the L2s more than I like Bitcoin? Because I see the applications. And I had, again, with the same smart friend that I love talking about this stuff with, we had the same conversation. And he kind of came around and agreed with me. And what we discussed was, when you have a lot of applications that require a certain token in order to use those applications, that drives demand for the token. That's Ethereum. These, concept. This application, decentralized financial applications, decentralized insurance claim approval. There's so many.
Yeah, Mark. So I think the point that you're making is fair. There are decentralized types of financial infrastructure that could be built. Part of the whole take that I just didn't hear anyone bring it up, so I'm going to bring it up.
Wait.
The idea. Oh, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Let me finish my point. What happens is when consumers and businesses are using these smart contract-driven applications on other networks, Ethereum, Polygon, Optimistic, whatever it may be, they have to buy the tokens in order to use those applications. Consumers will have to do the same thing in order to use those applications. And that is going to create intrinsic demand for those tokens. The people who are making these decisions on trying to find alternatives to treasuries and trying to get more effective yield are going to see those trends. Well, if you go to markcuban.com and start to look at my investments, you'll see that I'm investing where there are applications, right? Because I think that those applications are going to drive a whole lot more utilization than what you're hoping Lightning does. And because of that, that's what creates the competition and risk for Bitcoin beyond store of value. Now, on the flip side, because all these other networks are doing these other applications are not trying to be pure store of values, even though they can be speculative. And a lot of these trading desks will buy them because they see, they see the tokens as products. And as long as there's more demand than supply, the price will go up. There'll be some competition for Bitcoin there. But because Bitcoin is very limited in what Lightning Network can do and will be for at least the next couple years, that's going to work in Bitcoin's favor in terms of pricing.
Mark, you keep saying Bitcoin store of value. So how are you thinking about the remittance problem that has already been solved in El Salvador, where it's just swapping from fiat to Bitcoin rails back into whatever fiat they're wanting to use down in El Salvador? The person doesn't even know that they're using Bitcoin.
That's just one application that El Salvador chose to use. Great. But it's not like other applications, other platform networks can't do the exact same thing.
In an instant, they can't do that one.
But so Mark, the thing that I think that I just want to hear your take on this, I guess, is like, look, if we look at a company, one of the things we think about is what's the competitive moat, and then how sustainable is that moat? And so when you think about, for Bitcoin, it's kind of what is the monetary premium? So just like, hey, if you're looking at real estate in New York City, the price trades far above what the cap rate would be for like a small town in Ohio. So why can Manhattan real estate collect all this monetary premium that the small town in Ohio can't? Part of it is network effects. Part of it is, people know the supply is constrained. It's like kind of an island. And there's all these things that I think there's a similar analogy to be made with Bitcoin, where with Bitcoin, it's not going to change. With something like Ethereum, even the older Ethereum developers have just quit, or they've changed tack. All of a sudden, they've changed multiple times. They failed to deliver as a management team. There's all these things where they're failing, and then Bitcoin already works now as it is. So it's kind of like, this thing already works, so it makes sense.
You're selling yourself. Gee, you're selling yourself, right? You're selling yourself. Consumers don't care. People in New York just want some place to live. And if they can get a place where the value goes up and it's a store of value, great. So while you're arguing about the recipe and how much butter should go into the brownie recipe, people are just tasting the brownies to see which ones they like best.
Yeah, and so you brought up the video games, and so like that just crystallized it for me. Okay, maybe I am selling myself. I'm definitely deep down the rabbit hole, so totally fair. But think about the total addressable market difference. That's the point that I was trying to make. Something like a Bitcoin is like global money. It can take the monetary premium from Manhattan real estate. Something like Axie Infinity, it's like EVE Online money. Or what is the market cap of the world?
You sound like Charles Harkin. You sound like the Cardano guys, right? Well, we're in Africa doing school stuff for children in Nigeria, right? There is no platform that doesn't have a story. Polygon talks about what they're doing in India, right, and in the United States. There's no platform that doesn't have an analogous story that you just brought up. Now, the difference is the finite, and there's even others that
I'm saying that serious asset allocators are going to look at Bitcoin for fundamental reasons. I'm not talking about helping orphans. So I'm not trying to.
No, I agree. Look, as a store of value, and serious asset allocators are looking at it as a store of value. They don't give a shit about how much it's being used in El Salvador.
Mark, we're kind of getting all over the place here, but I'd really like to ask you, you seem to be someone that's very heavy on Ethereum, and you seem to feel very, very confident about its future. Doesn't it worry you at all that going from proof of work to proof of stake, have you taken a deep analysis of why it's become so difficult for the Ethereum Foundation to find an exit plan here? Because they've pushed the difficulty bomb past multiple times now, and they haven't been able to find a solution to move from proof of work to proof of stake. I mean, as an investor, aren't you worried that this is kind of like showing that they're unable to get it done and unable to make the transition?
Not really, because they implemented 1559, and there's L2s ready to pick up the slack.
And now the fees are exploding.
Okay, so, but Mark, ultimately they're trying to go to proof of stake, and they know that they need to go to proof of stake, but they've been unable to do that so far because they know that.
Yeah, but we can let's go back to 2017. Let's go back to 2017 and all the arguments. Bitcoin how many times did it fork?
This is talking about a fundamental base layer change. You're talking about changing making a very large change to the protocol, which will actually destroy the original chain. So when they drop
that was the same argument on
No, we're
blockchain.
just talking about Ethereum right now. We're just talking
No,
about Ethereum.
I get it. But the point is, Bitcoin overcame it. And
no,
sure,
Bitcoin has never gone through this kind of a change before, though. This is a pretty dramatic change. You're talking
This
about
is very dramatic.
rebuilding the plane.
We're talking about doing a beacon chain with 64 other blockchains that are going to, port itself into it. Like, this is like having an open heart surgery on the protocol.
And you know what? If they have to roll back and they can't, great. But at the same time, again, it's the brownie versus the recipe. I'm guessing that Vitalik will figure it out. That's a bet of mine.
But that's a fun analogy. I mean, and that's interesting to say that Vitalik will figure it out, but they haven't been able to figure it out. Like, listen, like a lot of chains have started on proof of stake, and that's fine. That works for them. But moving from proof of work to proof, just real quick, I just want to finish. Moving from proof of work to proof of stake has proven to be extremely difficult.
Yes,
part of the reason is because what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to fire the miners. And in the recent past, they've treated the miners very poorly. They've gone from 5 ETH to 4 ETH to 3 ETH. So they've been cutting the pay of their security guards for a long time. Now they've done EIP 1559. They're burning the fees. As they get closer and closer to dropping the difficulty bomb, they're essentially saying to the miners, hey, we're about to fire you. We're about to let you go, just so you know in advance. Mark, I don't know if I know you've had a lot of employees. Have you ever let any of your employees know that you're going to fire them 6 months in advance and continue to let them work the job?
Yeah, but isn't that kind of like halving?
No, it's not like having at all. It's not like having at all.
ASICs, and you're going to have to buy new ASICs, and
it's not like having it all. They're moving to validators, so they're completely
okay. So
that's
it's not a pure analogy, and it's not purely I know the difference between mining and proof of work and proof of stake, but
what's the difference?
Well, hold on, Mark. The halving is a preset. We know that's coming.
Yeah, you know it's
but what's the difference? No, hold on. But hold on. What's the difference between proof of work and proof of stake?
One has validators and one has miners, right? And so that's the difference. And you can put up money and become a validator, et cetera, et cetera. But the bigger point is that it's not just about mining, right? And it's not just about halving is coming. There's an ASIC war. And there's a war to keep on pushing the envelope in terms of the instruction set that is required to solve the problem. And that's not cheap.
But this is really getting away from ultimately the transitionary period. Like
to
get from proof of work to proof of stake, they'll have to difficulty bomb the entire proof of chain network.
I'm not arguing that it's a risk. I agree with you that it's a risk. You asked me if I understand that it's a risk. I agree with you that it's a risk. I think, so if they can't solve that, then maybe I'm 100% wrong. Okay, I've been wrong before. But if they can solve it, I'm 100% right.
Well, I hope they, have an opportunity to solve it, because a lot of people's money is going to be seriously at stake if they're unable to solve the transition.
But we're talking about the same type of risk proposition with Lightning.
No.
Lightning has been around for how long?
Totally wrong, Mark.
How long has Lightning been around?
Since 2017.
Been in production for.
And so how long has it taken for really to be put into production?
No, it's been in production for 4 years.
Right, but okay, so to really be put to use, because it hasn't been getting 4% week-to-week growth.
I can send you whatever you want right now.
Proof of stake isn't even a reality yet. I mean, you're talking about comparing something like Lightning Network, which has been in use and has been used by nation states.
You got a country that's using it as legal tender on the Lightning Network today.
Right, today, 4 years later. But at the same time, right, let's say Ethereum just screws the pooch. Okay, as I said earlier, not all of these networks are going to survive. There'll be someone else to take its place. I'll have lost my investment. Shit happens.
Yeah,
hey guys,
that was one of the things I was going to ask.
Guys, real quick, I got to leave, but Mark, I just want to say thank you for coming up here. I know that.
I got to go too, guys. This has been
one versus many. I'll see you guys later.
Hey, Mark, I appreciate you coming up.
Mark.
Yeah, that was fun. Hey, how many people are on this thing?
15,000.
Let's do it again.
So me versus 15,000, that's always fun.
Getting a lot of messages, Mark, that you held your own. Honestly, pretty impressed by your ability to come in here and speak amongst the Vipers. Yeah, Preston, thank you so much for trying to do this room together.
It was fun.
Absolutely.
You
Mark,
guys, hey Preston, you guys got to do this again sometime down on the south side.
Thanks for coming on, Mark. My only gripe is stop talking about Dogecoin.
Yeah, it's a great introduction to cryptocurrency. I'll keep on talking about it.
You'll
never hear me talk about it as an investment.
Tell people to go start a full node.
Yeah, right.
Hey, Mark,
because that's easy.
Mark, thank you for the back and forth. Enjoy
it. It is.
Thank you.
My 8-year-old son put mine together.
All right. Well, my 11-year-old did Ethereum, so we're good. All right, guys, take care.
Hey, see ya.
Take care. Bye.
See you, Mark. Appreciate it, man. Wow, Preston, that was cool.
I was not expecting that, Preston. That was incredible.
Yeah, it's good that he came on. I mean, I disagree with him so much. Most of it just comes down to the timing. Like, here's the thing. Like, he's saying, hey, this thing could go in many different directions. I want to own, a little bit of all this. And I mean, the guy's a billionaire and he wants to spread out his position size, right? That's how he's thinking about it. I think that his timing's off, right? Like, I really think that what we're seeing is a total catastrophe in fixed income due to the actions, decades and decades of actions with respect to the central banks, right? And so when you look at like what caused all of this quote unquote crypto to be stood up and to come to light, it was something that was searching a problem. Well, what was the problem? Well, it was the central bankers manipulating fixed income rates for decades, right? So that's why it came to be. So it comes into existence to solve that specific problem, to provide a 10x gain, 100x, 1000x gain to society, right? And then all these other things start like growing on the side of it, right? These other things can turn into something. We have no idea, right? But when I look at like the timeline of like how this is going to play out with, call it $18 trillion worth of negative yielding bonds on the market, like they're pushing this thing straight off the cliff's edge. And all of that buying power, the $300 trillion in fixed income, is going to go somewhere. And let me tell you, it's going to go somewhere that people trust and that aren't concerned that whether they're going to be able to port 24 blockchains into a beacon chain that's moving to a new type of clearing mechanism and like all this other stuff. Like, it's not going there. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just don't see that happening. Now, would some portion of it go there? Maybe. I don't know. But like, I'm not one that's going to try to, how does Greg Foss say it? You're too smart by a half or whatever. But like,
too smart by a half. It's a rounding error.
Too smart by a half.
Preston,
like, keep it simple. Yeah, keep it simple. Like, you don't have to overthink this, right? This is all about decentralization and security, right? Like, it's the security of the buying power that it can't be lost. And so the faster that people figure that out,
he hasn't done the work. That's the problem. He hasn't done the work.
And he's just outsourcing. He's outsourcing that through position size of just spreading it out over everything, right? And if he's wrong about one thing, then he's like, whatever. But
yeah, I think that's the thing, Preston. It's like he's thinking of it as an investor and where can I allocate capital? Where can I get returns? Whereas
just like all these hedge funders.
Yeah, whereas a lot of people maybe in this room are thinking about, like, this is my fucking money. Like, what do I do to protect myself? So I don't think he's done the work.
But as soon as you start digging in on the technical of like how are they going to move from proof of work to proof of stake? Like, it just collapses, right? Like, he can't get into that conversation because he hasn't done the work.
Do you guys think he genuinely believes that people are not buying like large amounts of Dogecoin, or is he just kind of protecting himself by thinking people are only throwing $20 at it?
I think he's talking bullshit.
I have no idea. I just, if I was going to defend him, he likes to have fun, right? Like, that's the persona that he has on TV, and whether that's what he's like in real life or not, I have no idea. But like, he likes to have fun. He kept saying it's fun. People were just having fun with it. But I don't think that he realizes that there are a lot of people that are stuffing like significant amounts of their proportional wealth into that mess, right? And it's a disaster waiting to happen. I mean, look at the price action compared to Bitcoin over the last 4 or 5 months, right? Like, you've lost a significant portion of your buying power if that's where you were at because you listened to Mark Cuban on Ellen. So like, that's my issue, and that's why I poked him there at the end before we left. It's like, dude, stop talking about it. Like, do some homework here. You need to be trying to help the 8 million people or however many follow him.
Yeah, but really, it's homework on sound money that he needs to work on, right? Like, the fundamental question whether an inflationary currency is something that he thinks can be used as a medium of exchange, or if a deflationary sound store of value can be used as a medium of exchange as well. Like, if you don't start there, then the second order effects of all this technology don't even make any difference.
Yeah, and so the thing that Preston is talking about, for just for folks in the audience, about like, hey, what's happening with the fixed income world. I think the reason that's important is basically, I try to make this point, but like in the past, you could have money in a savings account and you would be good. It would like help towards your retirement. Now the returns on your savings account is like 0.5%. So you're losing money because they're printing so much money. They're printing more than that 0.5%. So what's happening for these like really large funds is they're moving into riskier and riskier stuff just so they can meet those return hurdles of like, call it 8%, 7%, so that they can pay out their retirees. The thing is, even for the smaller folks, like they're seeing the same thing. When you see people buying lottery tickets, what you're seeing is people who aren't doing math, they're not being rational, they're just looking for some crazy risk return ratio where maybe they can think about actually meeting their retirement needs. And so it's, that's when you see like, college students buying meme stocks and stuff. It's the same kind of concept for the bigger investors and for the smaller investors. And like, that's not a sustainable way to run a society. Whereas I think something like Bitcoin kind of is.
I don't have anything else. Rob, you have the room here if you want to keep it rolling, and I can hand it off to anybody else if they want to keep chatting. But I'm going to head out.